"I will marry any of your daughters," said the Duke of Jerrold. "You may choose. I have no preference, and I should be obliged if we could settle it this morning." Sir Hubert Lowell, who had been about to offer him more coffee, put the pot down with a small crash. "Any of them. Any of them. The settlement will be 40,000 upon her and 8 upon each of the others, and the mortgage on this house discharged on the day of the wedding." Miles laid his gloves across his knee. "I am aware how this sounds. I have no time in which to make it sound better. My grandfather's will requires me to be married before my 35th birthday, which falls on the 7th of June. It is the 24th of April. And if you are not, then the Marlbrook lands and everything on them pass to a cousin of mine in Northamptonshire, who has never seen them, and who will sell the timber within the year because he has said so at his club." Miles heard his own voice go flat and did not trouble to correct it. 9,000 a year, Sir Hubert, and 11 farms and a village. Not the title and not the abbey. Those are entailed and safe. Merely the half of my property that has people living on it. Sir Hubert sat back slowly. He was a kind, weak, badly off man who had been a good friend to Miles's father, and he had 4 daughters and no sons. "You had better see them," he said. They came in one after another over the next quarter hour, which was, Miles reflected afterward, the most humiliating 15 minutes of any life, and none of it his own. Miss Augusta Lowell was 26, handsome, and had been in love with a curate for 4 years. She looked at Miles with the level courage of a woman going to the assizes, and he could not bear it. Miss Honoria was 24, and blushed continuously, and agreed with everything he said, including 2 things that contradicted each other. Miss Selina was 22 and looked frankly delighted, which was somehow the worst of the 3, and talked for 11 minutes about Jerrold Abbey, which she had once seen from a road. "There is a 4th, Miles said. "Beatrix," Sir Hubert coughed. She keeps the bees, your grace, and she does the still-room and a good deal of the garden, and she is very likely at this moment." The door opened. The young woman who came in was soaked from the knees down and had straw on her, and she was carrying a stone jar in the crook of one arm and a squirming, indignant, black and white terrier under the other, and she was saying, "Papa, the mill sluice is jammed again, and the lower path is a river, and if Cobb does not come this week, I shall." Then she saw that there was a duke in the room. She stopped. She looked at her father, and at her 3 sisters ranged along the wall like plate at an auction, and at the Duke of Jerrold, and Miles watched her put the entire business together in about 4 seconds, which nobody else in the house had managed in a quarter of an hour. "Oh," said Beatrix Lowell, "you cannot be serious." "Beatrix, he has offered for whichever of us you like, has he not?" She set the dog down. It shook itself over a Turkey carpet. "Augusta is engaged to Mr. Pethick in everything but the announcement. Honoria cannot say no to a fishmonger, and Selina would marry a gatepost with a coronet on it. So you paraded them." She turned to Miles. "Your Grace, forgive me, I am wet and I am going to be rude. What sum did you name?" 40,000 upon the lady, 8 upon each of her sisters, and the mortgage. "And the reason?" "A will. 9,000 a year and 11 farms to a cousin who will cut the timber, unless I marry by the 7th of June. "Then hire a lawyer, not a wife," Beatrix said. "There must be 40 ways round a will." "There are none. It has been looked at by 3 sets of counsel in 11 years, and the phrase they all use is admirably drawn." Miles found that he had risen to his feet without meaning to. "You think me contemptible." "I think you tired," she said, "which is worse, because a contemptible man might be argued with." She pushed the wet hair off her forehead with the back of her wrist. You walked in here and offered to take any one of 4 women as though we were a pen of ewes, and my father was going to let you, because he loves us and he is frightened, and that is the whole ugly truth of this room. So, no. Not Augusta, and not Honoria, and not Selina, who would say yes and be miserable at 40. You may have me. The room made a sound. Beatrix. It is the only honest arrangement in it, Papa, because I am the only one of us who does not want to be married at all. She looked back at Miles. But I will not be chosen this morning like a ewe. If you want me, your grace, you will have to spend the 6 weeks. Doing what? Courting me, said Beatrix Lowell. Properly. Badly, probably. 1 condition a week, and if you fail any of them, you may go to Northamptonshire and beg your cousin for the timber. Miles heard himself say, agreed, before he had considered a single consequence. The conditions were as follows, and he kept every one of them. In the first week he was to come to the hives at 6 in the morning and be shown how a swarm is taken, and not flinch. He flinched. She allowed it on a technicality, since he had also not run, and had held the skep while 100 weight of bees came down into it, and had gone back to the house with 3 stings and a great deal to think about. In the second week he was to walk the lower path with her and cob the millwright and understand why the sluice jammed, and pay for it himself, and let Cobb explain it at length. Cobb explained it for 2 hours and 11 minutes. Miles paid. In the third week he was to bring her nothing. No flowers, no jewels, no gloves. He was to bring her 1 piece of true information about himself that he had never told anybody, and she would decide whether it was any good. He told her about the winter he was 14, when his mother had died and his father had shut up Jerrold Abbey and gone to Naples for 8 months, and Miles had been left with a tutor and 40 servants in a house of 90 rooms, and had begun eating his dinner in the kitchen passage with the second footman, because it was the only place in the building where anybody talked, and had gone on doing it until he was 17. Beatrix Lowell did not say anything sympathetic. She sat down on the mounting block and was quiet for a while, and then said, "Is that why you did it like an auction? Because you cannot ask for a thing?" "I have never in my life asked anybody for anything," Miles said, "except money, and that through an attorney." "Well," she said, "then it is fortunate you have fallen among honest people. 4th week, you will ask me for something, small, anything at all, and you will have to mean it." He worked on it for 4 days. On the 5th he found her in the still room with her sleeves back, straining honey through muslin, and said, "Miss Lowell, will you tell me your opinion of the Marlbrook drainage scheme? Not the polite one, the other one. I have had it from 6 men who all want the contract, and I have nobody to ask." Beatrix looked at him for a long moment over the muslin. "That," she said, "was very well done. Sit there. It will take an hour, and you will not like the first 10 minutes. It took 2 hours. He did not like the first 40 minutes. He altered the scheme in 11 particulars the following week, and it came in under estimate for the first time in the history of the Jerrold estate. And somewhere in the 5th week, he could not date it, which frightened him. Miles stopped counting the conditions and began counting the mornings. He came to Cleve at 6, because at 6 she was at the hives with the smoker, and a veil pushed back and no company at all, and because he had discovered that he would rather stand in a wet orchard being told he was doing it wrong than sit in any drawing-room in England. It went wrong on the 2nd of June. His attorney came down from London with the license and the settlements, and stayed to dinner at Cleve. And after the second glass, Mr. Rundle became expansive in the way that attorneys do when a difficult business is nearly closed. "Near run thing, your grace, but a handsome result, And I will say this, Sir Hubert, you may be easy, his grace has been perfectly free in the matter throughout. There was never any compulsion upon him beyond the property. The title, the abbey, the London house, the funds, all quite safe, will or no will. It is only the Marlbrook lands that hang upon it, and had his grace preferred to keep his liberty, he might have shrugged and let them go and been a very rich man still. Not many would have troubled. There was a small silence at the table. Miles looked up and found Beatrix looking at her plate. She was not at the hives the next morning. She was not at the hives on the 4th of June either, and on the 5th there was a note at the Abbey in a round, hasty hand. It thanked him for 6 weeks of unfailing patience. It said that she had been thinking about Mr. Rundle. It said that she had agreed to the thing in April, believing that a village and 11 farms hung upon it, and that her own feelings were beside the point, and that she had been perfectly content on those terms, because a woman may be interchangeable for a village and not mind. It said that she now understood he had never needed to marry at all, that he had chosen to save Marlbrook when he might have shrugged, and that this altered everything, because it meant a man was giving up his liberty for a piece of ground, and she would not be the price of a piece of ground, and she could not tell, and would never be able to tell, whether he was marrying her or the 11 farms. It said that there were 2 days left, and that Selina would still say yes. It ended, "Do not come to the hives, truly, I shall not be there." Miles read it 4 times, and then sat in the library at Jerrold Abbey for the whole of a June afternoon, with the shutters half closed. He could see the shape of it perfectly. He could produce 11 arguments. Every one of them would end with a woman being persuaded, 3 days before a deadline, by the man who profited. At 6 in the evening he sent for Rundle and asked him a question, and Rundle went white and said, "Your Grace, I beg you will not answer it. If the hour passes, it passes. Noon on the 7th. There is no grace, no extension, no equity. Marlbrook goes to Mr. Grisman Jerrold at 1 minute past 12, and no court in England will take it back off him." "Thank you," said Miles. "You may go home." The 7th of June was a fine, still, blue morning. Miles was at the hives at 6 o'clock, which he had been forbidden, and she was not there. He waited an hour, and she came at 7 with the smoker, because it was a working orchard and the bees do not care about anybody's arrangements. She stopped dead when she saw him. "You are not to be here." "No." "The license is in my pocket," Miles said. "The chaise is at your father's door. Your father is in his best coat and has been since 5:30, poor man, and Mr. Rundle is in the church with the settlements, and the whole of this parish knows what the hour is, and there are 5 hours in it." He took out his watch and looked at it. "I am not going to use them." Beatrix Lowell set the smoker down very slowly on the grass. "What? You wrote that you could not tell whether I was marrying you or the 11 farms, and that you would never be able to tell." He put the watch away. "You are right. You could not. Not with the 7th of June standing behind me. There is only one way in the world to make it a fair question, and it costs 9,000 a year, and I find that I do not care as much as I expected to." "You cannot," she said. "You cannot, Marlbrook. The timber, the village, you told me in April, the timber. I have spent this week doing what I should have done 11 years ago, instead of hunting for a wife." Miles sat down on the low orchard wall, because his legs were not entirely reliable. "The 11 farms are let on long leases which my cousin cannot break. Rundle has confirmed it 3 times. The Marlbrook woods are the only thing at hazard, and on Thursday I bought them. Out of my own funds, at a valuation, with the timber standing. The woods are conveyed away from the estate, and they are mine whatever happens at noon, and the village keeps its coppice and its firing forever. It cost me a very great deal of money, and it has taken every hour of 5 days, and I have not slept, and Rundle thinks me insane. And Marlbrook itself goes to a man in Northamptonshire who has never seen it. He will have a handsome house and 11 rents and no trees to cut. Miles looked up at her. That is the price. I have paid it. As of noon today, there is nothing whatever in this for me except you, and if you send me away, I shall go, and I shall have no complaint, and I shall not come back to be a burden on your mornings. Beatrix stood in the wet grass with the veil pushed back off her hair, and did not speak for a long time. The bees went over between them, back and forth, entirely unconcerned. "When is noon?" she said at last. 4 hours and 20 minutes. "Then we shall wait for it," said Beatrix Lowell, and sat down on the wall beside him. "Here. Not in the church, not with Papa in his best coat, not with an attorney and a chaise and everybody watching the clock. Here with the bees until the hour has gone by and there is nothing left on the table. And then you may ask me if you still want to." "I shall still want to." "We shall find out," she said. They sat on the orchard wall at Cleve Manor for 4 hours and 20 minutes. They did not talk about the will. She told him about her mother, who had kept the same hives, and about the summer the swarm went into the church roof and the sexton's revenge. He told her about the kitchen passage and the second footman, whose name had been Pike, and who had taught him to whistle through his teeth, and who was now his understeward at the Abbey and had been for 9 years. At 11:30 the terrier came, and sat on Miles's boots, and went to sleep. At noon the church clock at Cleve began to strike, and Miles took out his watch and laid it open on the stone between them, and they both looked at it, and neither of them said anything at all for 12 strokes. Then the last one went, and the orchard was quiet, and 9,000 a year was gone. Miles closed the watch. "Beatrix Lowell," he said, "there is nothing in my hands. I am asking you because in the first week you made me hold a skep full of bees and did not laugh at me for flinching. Because in the 4th week you made me ask for something and it turned out I wanted your opinion more than I have ever wanted anybody's. Because I have come to this orchard at 6 in the morning for 6 weeks and I would come for 30 years. Not for a village, not for a will. Will you marry me?" She was crying, which he had never once seen, and she was extremely angry about it. "Yes," Beatrix said, "you appalling man, yes. Do you know how much money you have just?" 9,000 a year. "Yes," she said again, and then she put her arms round his neck in a working orchard in front of 11 hives and a sleeping terrier, and Miles held on to her, and thought that he had never in his life made a better bargain, and that his grandfather, who had drawn an admirably worded will in order to force his heir to be sensible, had produced precisely the opposite result, and would have been furious about it. They were married at Cleve on the 19th of June, £400 poorer and 1 property short, with the license Rundle had brought down and refused to take away again. Augusta married her curate in the autumn on £8,000, which Miles paid because he had promised it in April, and had no intention of being released by a technicality. Honoria married a man who did not permit her to agree with him and grew brisk. Selina married very well indeed and was perfectly happy and told everybody, for the rest of her life, that she had very nearly been Duchess of Jerrold, which was true. The Marlbrook woods were never cut. They are managed to this day on a rotation which the Duchess of Jerrold argued out with 3 foresters over the course of a wet winter, and won. And there are 11 hives in the south garden at Jerrold Abbey, moved from Cleve in a cart with great ceremony, and the honey from them is sent every Michaelmas to every farm on the estate in a stone jar with a paper label. And the label, which is written out by hand in the still room, says only, "Cleve, from the Duchess. Do not shake it."